Let's go straight to Chris Snowdon. He's head of lifestyle economics at the free market think tank Institute of Economic Affairs. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Let's race through these. We've got this bill today on the Tobacco and Vapes Bill that's going to get, I think it's a final reading, actually heading into law. What's that actually going to do in terms of tackling smoking and vaping?
That's a really good question, because MPs are actually being asked to vote for a pig in a poke. When Sunak came up with this legislation, he was in a big rush, and so a lot of it was basically unfinished, and just said, well, we're going to let the health, this law will allow the Secretary for Health to decide what to do with e-cigarette flavours, e-cigarette packaging, where people can smoke, where people can vape, and it hasn't been updated. So the new law is basically just an enabling act for Wes Streeting. It just says that Wes Streeting at any point in the future can decide whether he's going to ban smoking outdoors or vaping outdoors or vaping indoors or what flavours can be sold. So actually MPs don't really know what they're voting for, except for this weird generational tobacco ban, which won't have any effect on anybody until 2027. So there's really no rush with this, and yet it is being rushed through.
And it's copying what they were doing in New Zealand, which they decided to abandon. And of course, again, people talk about we want to stop children smoking or children vaping or this and that. You think, but they're not allowed to anyway. We could just enforce the laws we actually already have, and we're going to have a situation where, you know, two people born one day apart are one of them's going to be allowed to buy cigarettes, the other one isn't. I mean, I don't think people have thought this through. As soon as that actually happens, I think people are going to go, that was a dumb law.
They will, and I think that by the time this really has any teeth and starts affecting people significantly above the age of 17, it's going to be a bit of an irrelevance. And quite frankly, on a personal level, I'm less and less bothered about this legislation, because so much of the cigarette market, certainly, and increasingly the vaping market, is just on the black market. It's
so
illegal. It's illicit.
Yeah.
We've lost a huge amount of tax. Tobacco duty's gone down by £1.5 billion in the last couple of years, and that's not because many fewer people are smoking, although smoking rates are dropping. About 26% of cigarettes are now illicit. That's going up rapidly. And a very large proportion of the disposable vapes that are going to be banned next June are already illegal. So look, this market is, in a sense, it's already a free market because it's completely unregulated and actually lower tax, you know. So I really think it makes very little difference what the government does going forward if it continues to hike up tobacco duty as it has.
I mean, there's a point when you're getting money back for it and you're just discouraging people, and you get past a point and then you just create that huge big market, and again, a much safer market for many of the organised crime criminals to get involved in. Let me ask you about whether we're going to have a criminal market in tasty, chocolatey, high-calorie, high-sugar food at this rate because of these attempts to crack down on what we're told is the obesity crisis. And there's just non-stop stuff, isn't it? God, BBC Radio 4 are obsessed with this. I think everybody, all these ghastly people are eating this horrible fattening food, and if only they could just eat sourdough pizza with them, it would be OK. But Boris Johnson has waded into this, and he's blamed the Church of England for Britain's obesity crisis, saying that its failure to provide people with spiritual sustenance, which they need, is leading people to gorge themselves on bad food instead. I did not see this one coming, Chris.
This comes from a compilation of interviews that Henry Dimbleby and Dolly Van Tulleken did with various former prime ministers to ask them why governments don't do even more on food and obesity. And I suspect that this was a bit of a Johnsonian ramble. He may have had a glass of wine beforehand, but I don't think he was taking this interview very seriously, from what I can tell.
Why not? With the government's food anti-obesity czar? I mean, for goodness sake, surely Henry Dimbleby needs to be taken seriously. I mean, you know, he's the son of someone famous.
He was on the Today programme yesterday on Radio 4.
Of course he was.
Saying that now, because they banned so-called junk food at the entrance to supermarkets, he said, well, now you go into the supermarket, all you see is fruit and veg. But if you go to the other aisles, you'll find, you know, the Kit Kat breakfast cereal that seems to obsess these people. And we need to have black box warnings on cereal saying do not eat it, and it shouldn't be advertised, and it can't be promoted, and it can't be sold at discounts. All of which, apart from the black box warnings, is already government policy. In fact, thanks to Boris Johnson, is already government policy, and he's all going to come in next year. I've never
understood the Boris Johnson scenario where he goes on and on about this stuff. He appears to jog all the time, mostly in his work shirts and football shorts, and yet constantly seems to be overweight. If I jogged that often, I'd be a size 10.
Yeah, I mean, he had this brush with death, didn't he, during COVID, which apparently was the thing that made him become a nanny statist on this. I think he probably regrets a lot of this now. It certainly was kicked into the long grass after he recovered from COVID, and that's why so much of this stuff hasn't yet been introduced.
Yeah, but Labour are fully on board with this stuff. Yeah, well, you know, we're going to talk about all of this many more times in the future, I'm sure. Chris Snowdon from the Institute of Economic Affairs, thank you very much, debunking all that nonsense as usual.